Hello, Yoga Alliance members and yoga community all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us again today. Please take a moment to fill out the uh, poll that shows up on your screen, letting us know exactly where you're joining us from. This information is so helpful to helping us schedule other events like these in the future. My name is Sharon Cyrus. I'm a member support representative here at Yoga Alliance. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am joined today by Kushi Malhotra. We're discussing the Subtle Body series, and this is the sixth of 7 episodes about this topic. Today we'll be discussing pranayama. Kushi Malhotra is an ERYT 200. She's a YACEP, an MSW. She's an MPH. She received her initiation at the Himalayan Institute in advanced training in Vinyasa Krama under Srivasta Ramaswamy under the lineage of T. Krishnamacharya. Kushi's teaching style is rooted in classical Hatha Yoga and Tantra, subtle body energetics, Vipassana, and Ayurveda. She lives half in the US and half in the Himalayas, where she serves as a guide in her mindful tourism venture, Simply Himalaya, that supports rural minded, mindful education and takes people on pilgrimage. On her website, www.kushyoga.com, you can find her podcast, Atha Yog Anusasanam, videos and other e-courses for your enjoyment. Thanks so much for joining us again, Kushi.
Thank
How are
you.
you?
Good. Thank you, Sharon. Namaste, everybody.
Namaste.
Nice to be with you all again. Our sixth session, slowly, or rather quickly, right? Time is passing by, and we are now towards the tail end of our series, the Subtle Body series. So, if you'd like to today, actually, maybe we can start with some Om chanting. You can join me, right? Chanting Om. We'll do this a few times, and right? As we chant, getting us in touch with the depth and breadth of our capacity to inhale, capacity to exhale, right? Chanting is one of the best ways to increase our breath capacity, which is ultimately so helpful in our practice of asana and pranayama. So, whenever you're ready, you may close your eyes. And when we chant Om, it's a Om that is derived from deep in the Manipura chakra, right? If you remember, that's the third chakra, the solar plexus. That's where the Ah starts, the Oo starts to travel up through the chest and the throat, and the ends in the soft palate and the touch of the lips, right? So feeling this wave of the Om traveling throughout your body. So start by taking your shoulder blades together at the back, chin slightly down in Jalandhara Bandha, stable seat, beginning to establish Samma Vritti, which means even inhale, even exhale. Check in with the nature and quality of your breathing. This will give you an indication of your mental state in this moment. Good. If you'd like, two hands in Anjali Mudra at the heart. Let's begin. Just a few rounds.
Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. This first Shanti for your own internal equilibrium. The second Shanti for those in your close circle. And the third Shanti for all beings. May all beings experience peace. Namaste. Good. So today we have a session that's focused on pranayama in asana. And I don't really like to separate them because so much of our pranayama practice is related to how we practice our asana, right? They are sort of twin sisters when we take them together, right? So let's see what we have for today. So right? If you remember from last week, we had a nice session. I think a lot of you enjoyed the storytelling and the mythology of so many of the asanas that we practice, in our daily, or whenever you practice your asana, you infusing the asana with the stories helps to give a sense of connection to the commonality of the human condition and human emotions, and the movement from the base Muladhara chakra to Sahasrara chakra, and how that movement up and down the spine is representative of the movement across our life course, across our yoga journey. And hearing these stories puts us in touch with the idea of the connection. It's not so much a connection to the deities, but the energy that is encompassed within the quality of the pose and what we are trying to do when we evoke these poses within ourselves, right? So I hope you had a nice time last week listening to these stories. Right. So some of you had asked me, do you have any recommendations for storybooks and this and that? There's one book published by the Himalayan Institute Press, and I haven't read the entire book myself. I've read parts and portions of it, but I do trust the Himalayan Institute, and their what they publish is very high caliber. So this might be a book, Downward Dogs and Warriors: Wisdom Tales for Modern Yogis. That's one that I can sort of recommend to you for taking your knowledge a little bit further in terms of mythology and the stories behind a lot of these poses. So here we go again, right? Now we're at session 6, how to incorporate pranayama into asana. As you see, we are developing a taste, right? Every session that we've had together is this rasa, this taste that we are finely tuning our senses towards, right? So maybe your taste was towards something else, right? In the yoga practice. And now, when I was a child, I used to hate karela, which is bitter gourd. And I used to just whenever my mom was looking, I would throw it away, or, try to put a little bit more off my plate. And, as children, we try to do all these little tricks and we think our parents aren't looking, but they definitely know that we're doing all these things. But as I grew up, I found that it became my favorite thing to eat. My taste developed towards that bitterness, right? Something in my body began to, crave that taste. And this is really a lot of how our yoga journey is. There are certain things that we just are very much averse to initially, right? Initially, maybe we don't have the openness or the understanding or even the depth of practice to make that taste available to our understanding. But slowly, session by session, I hope you're, slowly fine tuning that taste, developing that taste to understand
how important the concept of prana, the experience of prana is in each and every aspect of what it is that we are doing in the yoga practice, right? And this one, I feel today's session is very practical. I didn't give you a lot of suggestions, in previous sessions. I really wanted you to, get a sense of the devotion, right? Get a sense of the inspiration that comes from learning about these things. And then, right, today we're going a little bit more practical about some of my very practical suggestions about how we can start to journey towards the limb of pranayama within our asana practice. So actually, I wanted to ask a question, Sybil, if you wouldn't mind to open the chat box of, what are some of the hindrances that you experience either as a practitioner or a teacher in either teaching or learning pranayama, practicing pranayama as part of your daily discipline practice or whatever it is that you're teaching. So just curious to see what you all have to say about that. Let's see if I can see what it says. Time constraints, monkey brain. Uh-huh. Yeah, so you can type it in the chat box there. Yeah, why is practicing pranayama a little bit difficult? Monkey brain, difficulty in slowing down and giving myself space, allergies, fear of getting it wrong. My students think it's too woo-woo. I do practice doing it the right way, difficult to integrate. Wow, consistency. Some students are not open to it. When to practice in relation to asana, keeping it as simple as possible. Students don't understand benefits. Masks, of course, right now. Yeah. Making sure I'm using all three areas of the lungs to breathe. Uh-huh. I lose focus of the breath. I had physical constraints. Uh-huh. Right. I have to yawn a lot. Okay. Students don't understand the benefits. Okay. Yeah. So these are very understandable, I think a lot of it has to do with our own understanding and so much of our own, education in terms of what it is and why it is that we practice, right? So anything that we practice with that dedicated time, energy, and devotion becomes something that we can easily and accessibly share with our students as well, and for ourselves as practitioners, right? So let's take a look. I'll get into some of the details about what you all had mentioned, but I want to take a look at some of the quotes that, we talk about the Upanishads, right? The Upanishads and some of the quotes that are centered around prana and centered around the need for and the importance why pranayama actually is one of the most important limbs, right? And vastly underlooked limbs of the eight-limbed yoga path. So in the Chandogya Upanishad, it says, after a bird tied by a string flies here and there without finding a resting place, it finally settles down at the place where it is bound. Similarly, the mind, after flying here and there without finding a resting place, settles down in the breath, for the mind is bound to the breath, right? And we all know this, we all practice this, but this is the quality of what you're saying, this monkey brain, right? The mind flying here and there, and how to, right, limit the locus of its attention to specific places of prana, specific places within the body system itself, depending on what pranayama that we're practicing, and how to begin to tie down that flying bird, right? Eventually, it does begin to tire. And you might have noticed this through your asana practice or meditation practice. At some point, it does relinquish its control and give itself back to the breath. And this is from the Katha Upanishad. The self sends forth the exhalation and draws in the inhalation. All the gods worship that thumb-sized being who is seated in the middle of the lotus of the heart, right? In yoga, it's said that we have this being, this home of prana, the home of consciousness, is deep in the lotus of the heart. And it's from this place that is situated in the Anahata chakra that the breath comes out of and the breath recedes back into, right? And that's why so much of our yoga practice right? Maybe on the physical level, we understand, heart opening, but the idea that we get in contact with this self that is the one who sends out and receives the breath, right? And how when we practice pranayama, to bring back the essence of why we practice pranayama is that deep contact of the source, right? The very source of breath itself. And then this one from the Mundaka Upanishad. Truly, it is breath that pervades all beings. Knowing it, the wise person does not speak of anything else. Reveling in the self, delighting in the self, and performing work, such a person is the greatest of the knowers of the absolute, right? Last week, we talked about Surya and Chandra, right? Surya Namaskara, and how Surya was the essence of the absolute, right? The essence of the one that is permanent. And the Chandra, the moon, is the one that waxes and wanes, that changes with time, that is subject and bound to time and space. The breath itself, right, as this vehicle of Surya, vehicle of the absolute, right? When we connect to the breath, it becomes the bridge that draws us back from what is changeable in this world to that which is stable and still within ourselves. And this is what constitutes one who is wise, one who has not known that truth, but experienced that truth. And pranayama, right, is a way to really actively, with very deep quality, to know that truth of the self itself. The quality of pranayama is related with the limbs of asana and meditation as well. If you know the three guna, science of the Sankhya theory, right? The three gunas are the constituents of nature. So when we think about Prakriti is just all of what is manifest all around us. And Prakriti is split into three aspects, three constituents, right? One is sattva, next is rajas, and the third is tamas, right? So tamas is that which obscures or veils, right? Which creates this essence of maya or illusion to not see things as they are, right? Rajas is the active potential of this world, the one that projects out. And sattva is what's known as purity. All three are here, existent within every quality, everything in this world itself, including, of course, the human body and human mind. At some points, your mind, your body is overcome with tamas, at other times, overcome with rajas, at other times, illuminated in sattva. We all have these capacities, whether or not we practice yoga, right? Any person has the capacity to feel these things. Yoga helps us to transform the tamas, transform the rajas in a more active, engaged way to get to the sattva that reveals. Right? And each aspect of the limbs of yoga help to transform different aspects of sattva, rajas, and tamas. For example, the asana practice is for calming down the rajas, the activity of the mind, the constant activity of the body to project outwards. The pranayama helps then, once that rajas is in place, is calmed down, is regulated, then the pranayama comes in to help to unveil, right, that which has been obscured, is that which has been covered, the wisdom that has been covered in our own minds. And then through the pranayama, we move into meditation, which is what helps us to understand and reveal truth within ourselves. So the system of yoga, the system of Patanjali is a very important thing to hold, right? It's very important to follow through step by step because it helps us to transform these three constituents within ourselves. So the purpose of this asana, right, is, right, we know the word vinyasa, V and nyasa. Nyasa is to place with very specific intention, right? Usually nyasa in the Vedic time was when you placed mantras, right, in either external objects or you place mantras in different parts of the body. And V means to place in a very special way, right? So, what are we placing in a very special way? We're placing our concentration. And by placing our concentration in a very special way, our prana begins to follow, right? Wherever mind flows, that's where prana goes, right? So the three, yoga sutras related to the asana, you all probably have studied these before, but I really want to talk about especially the last one, right? Tato dvandha anabhighata, the capacity of the asana to reduce the pairs of opposites, right? So pairs of opposites in the world known as the eight worldly winds. And here we have the goddess, right? Holding this duality, the Prakriti herself as the manifestation of duality or dvaita, right? And the asana helps us to reduce the attachment to duality, which causes a lot of intolerance within ourselves, right? And in Buddhism, right, again, it's called these eight worldly winds. In yoga, we call them the dvandas or the pairs of opposites. And what are they? The attachment towards pleasure or the attachment towards pain, right? To be able to hold both together. The attachment towards loss and gain, the attachment or the intolerance, right, towards fame and disrepute, and towards praise and blame. When these things are circulating within us, within our mind, within our body, we become very imbalanced. So the asana helps to calm down the rajasic fervor of our mind, the belief in the pairs of opposites as who we are and what we are, as part of this prakriti, as part of this universe itself, and prepare the mind. By reducing rajas, we can then prepare the mind to start to penetrate slowly truth itself. So Krishnamacharya, according to the Yoga Rahasya, right, he qualified yoga as for three stages of our lives, right? And this is very important. I think a lot of us are in this train now that Krishnamacharya was only about the physical aspect of yoga. This is the current thought that's coming, that people are jumping on board. And I think it's important to hold back a little bit and understand the full breadth of Krishnamacharya's teachings, right? So he qualified these, according to the Yoga Shastras, according to the scriptures, for three aspects of our life course. So up to 25 years, known as Shrishtikrama, right? The youth, when our bodies are growing, when we're, starting to develop in the world, both physically, mentally, emotionally, right? This is the intensive asana for strengthening the limbs, internal organs, for healthy and proper growth, right? To stabilize the body, to get a strong, stable, balanced body, so that when we come to Sthitikrama, this middle-aged portion of our life, which I think many of us are in or who are watching, many of you might be in the Sthitikrama into the elder years of your life, right? He recommended then this is the time to practice pranayama and asana with the bandhas and mudras, and meditation when it is possible. This is because at this middle age time of life, we are so deeply involved in the world, right? We have so many responsibilities. We have our family life, we have our worldly life. And to have an aspect of our practice, and pranayama is an aspect of your practice that gives you a lot of prana. It gives you a lot of energy in a very short, concentrated amount of time to be able to hold all the demands of your life, right? Which is then based upon the asana practice that maybe you practice in your youth. What happens now in the modern age is that we don't come to, yoga until later on in life. So maybe we start with the asana, but then we get stuck there, right? It's just kind of the hamster wheel of asana without the deep evolved focus of the breath itself. And then as we move through these stages of life, and these stages of life may be related to your age, it may be related to your emotional life, how you're moving through the life course according to what is appropriate for you in the moment, right? In this later stages of life, known as Layakrama, right? Krishnamacharya suggested more pranayama, more chanting, and more focus on meditation, the quality, as we know, of Ishvara Pranidhana, the quality of surrender. because this is the point of life where we are coming close towards death, where we have to surrender, where we have to give up. So to take an active role in the way that we give up and surrender to the Lord, so that at the end of our life we do not fight and struggle as much, because we've practiced that active aspect of surrendering the sense of I through either the physical body, the sense of I through our emotional makeup, through our mental makeup, through the experiences that we've had in our lives, you know. So all of these things create this comprehensive model, right? And when we talked about the bandhas, we talked about how important the bandhas are for bringing in, for the Shushumna application, for bringing in the prana from a diffusive realm of all 72,000 nadis and to concentrate and bring into the central channel of the spine. And how now through the asana, with the pranayama focus and focus with the bandhas and mudras, we can start to develop a more evolved way of practicing, right? That was the intention and is the intention of Krishnamacharya. So the reason for this intensive focus of pranayama is that pranayama has the capacity, like a intense fire, to burn the impurities that are localized in our nadis or in the energy system, right? So these impurities burned up, right, through the restraint of the breath, or control and understanding of their inhalation or exhalation and the retention of the breath, right? And in the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali says there, of all the austerities, of all the tapas, right, there's no austerity that is superior than that of pranayama, right? Because, right, when we're learning about the gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, it is the guna, it is the practice that removes the guna of tamas, right? The veil that covers knowledge and heralds the dawn of wisdom, right? That allows the darkness then to be revealed to the light, right? Both have to be there present before you, right? And it's all about lifting that veil, learning how to lift that veil. Maybe you've had those experiences slightly in the asana practice, but when you actively start practicing pranayama, you begin to understand a very deep, profound realm of this inner life of the self. So the prana, the focus of the application of prana is known as prana vritti, right? So you know about chitta vritti, right? Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Chitta vritti is when vritti means rotation of consciousness, right? When your mind rotates, your consciousness rotates around chittas, around thought patterns, and around everything that's localized in the mind stuff. Now, we're changing that rotation of consciousness from chitta, from the mind, to prana. You're rotating your mind, your consciousness is being rotated, meaning being absorbed in prana itself, right? And this is done with the full concentration of the mind, right? When we practice asana, how to consume the mind in the physical practice, right? Through the energetic awareness of prana itself, right? And in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it says, just as lions, tigers, and elephants are gradually controlled, so is prana through practice. Otherwise, the practitioner is destroyed. And this is true. If you are a lion tamer or an elephant tamer, right? If you are not careful, if you are not precise about your every thought, speech, and action, that animal, that wild beast, can turn against you. And that wild beast that we're talking about is our own minds. If we are not patient, right, to develop that peace of mind, piece by piece, right, step by step, that mind can very quickly turn against us. And we've all had that experience of the mind turning against us, right? And literally destroying us, acting as our own enemy, right? And so when we practice pranayama, when we practice this awareness of prana, it starts with the devotion. It starts with the understanding, what we've been building over the last 6 sessions, the devoted aspect of why prana? Why is it so important, right? And can I feel that devotion to the very essence of life myself. If I can, if it's possible for me, then pranayama begins to have a less mechanical approach and a more deeply sustained approach in the quality of my own liberation, so that I do not destroy myself. My mind does not turn against me, right? And where are we concentrating, right? This full concentration of mind in the pranavritti is done with the four aspects of breath, right? There's your in breath, puraka or svasa. When you hold the breath in, antara kumbhaka. There's the out breath, rechaka or prasvasa, and the breath held out, bahya kumbhaka, or also known as shunyaka. You'll come many different words for the different qualities of breath. Here are some of them. But these are the four qualities of breath and the four aspects of your inhale and your exhale. It's not just inhale and exhale, it's also the turning of the breath from inhale to exhale, from exhale to inhale, and whether or not we're practicing breath retention, which, if you've read the text, is a very important part, right? Very much highlighted part, the kumbhaka, the retention, to do that when you are properly prepared. So maybe, right, like we've discussed, your whole life is just preparing yourself, right? It's not about reaching the goal of breath retention or kumbhaka, but having the proper preparation. Because if you do not properly prepare for holding the breath or doing the bandhas, then the practitioner will be destroyed, right? This is a very clear warning, right, that comes in the yoga, the yoga text as well, to warn the practitioner that it takes time, it takes effort, step by step. And to know the steps are very important. And to practice with a teacher who knows what they're doing is also very important, to learn the practice systematically. So in the Yoga Sutras, it tells us very clearly, Patanjali tells us very clearly, right, the parameters of our pranayama practice, right? So how pranayama manifests as, both external, internal, and restrained movements of breath, which are regulated and made long and subtle according to place, time, and number. All right, that's a lot to take in, but we can break it down step by step. There are certain parameters, right? What? One is the breath moving out, one is the breath moving in, the other is the restraint of breath, right? Regulating these to make the breath long and subtle, right? According to where we place our attention. The place is not the physical place, but where we place our attention when we are practicing pranayama, the time, the length of the breath, or the ratio of the breath, and the number, how many times we do the pranayama, right? All of these are developed step by step, right? So the mastery over the breath comes through the understanding first of sammavritti, right? Sammavritti means the equal inhalation, equal exhalation. The ability, right, to understand that an equalizing breath is what starts to balance the mind. And then slowly we begin to learn how to lengthen the breath, right? The second part of mastering the breath is lengthening the exhalation, right? And one of my teachers says that the exhale should be like a flow of oil being poured out of a vessel. So this unbroken stream of the exhalation. After we learn to master the long exhalation, lengthening the exhalation, we start to practice mastering a long inhalation, right? And another metaphor given for the inhalation is as though you are drawing in air from a lotus stem or a straw, right? If you were to take a lotus stem and to suck in the air in a smooth, cooling way, right? Unbroken stream, both with the exhalation, both with the inhalation. When these are regulated, created smooth, long, and deep, then we can begin to master kumbhaka, breath retention, right? And this is a place where a lot of people stop, right? Right before kumbhaka, because of maybe lack of a proper teacher, maybe because of fear, maybe because of obvious contraindications that, you shouldn't be practicing the kumbhaka or the breath retention. So these Slowly, first, second, and third steps are steps that we can start to teach and practice, right, across the board. Then comes the more intermediate practices of the kumbhaka, either first retaining the breath after the inhalation, or second, bahya kumbhaka, retaining the breath after exhalation, right? So retaining of the breath after inhalation is easier, you can say, the easier form of kumbhaka than retaining the breath after exhalation. After we start to understand the retention of breath, then we can understand the pranasthana, where we place our attention when we practice our pranayama. For example, when you practice the Nadi Shodhanam practice, right, your attention is in the nostrils. When you practice Ujjayi, your attention is in the throat. When you're practicing Bhastrika, your attention is either at the abdomen or at the soft palate with the strike of the breath, right? The pranasthanas are the places of where we place our mind when practicing pranayama. And then the ratio of our breathing. So in Samavritti, the ratio is 1:1. When we start to lengthen the exhalation, the ratio becomes 1:2, right? And then when we start to include the breath holding, the retentions, maybe it's 1:1:1. Breathing in, holding, breathing out, 1:1:1. And then maybe it's 1:1:1:1. Breathing in for a count of 5, holding the breath in for a count of 5, breathing out for a count of 5, holding the breath out for a count of 5. So these ratios have a system in which they are approached as well. So learning first the 1:1 ratio, am I able to maintain that? Okay, then it's the 1:2 ratio. Am I able to maintain that without any physical distress in my breathing pattern, without any physical distress in my respiratory tract, right? This is very important to start to understand, start to feel within oneself. Once the ratio is understood, then you can think about how many rounds of pranayama, right? So how many rounds of my Nadi Shodhanam practice, how many rounds of my Ujjayi pranayama, how many rounds of my Bhastrika. The number of rounds increases with your capacity, right? If you decide, all right, I'm just going to go for 20 rounds of Nadi Shodhanam, but you are gasping for breath halfway through, but continue to force yourself to do it, you're causing yourself a lot of harm. The pranayama is working against you, right? That's where in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the practitioner becomes destroyed because your mind, your prana then is not leading you towards that successful state of removing tamas. It's actually causing a lot of agitation, or vata, a lot of agitation in your system, right? And then slowly, you'll find that your breathing is longer, is smoother, right? And all of these start to help one another, right? The long, smooth breath, the idea of samavritti, enhancing the exhalation, enhancing your capacity for the inhalation. Slowly, you'll find yourself beginning to master this breath, or the master of pranayama itself. So according to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Gheranda Samhita, there are many different types of pranayamas, and some of them you might practice, some of them you might not. There's Shitkari, Shitali, which is drawing in through the tongue, or sucking in through the teeth, the air. There's Brahmari, the bee's breath, Bastrika, the bellows breath, Murcha, holding the breath in and then slowly releasing the breath out. Surya Bhedana, a type of alternate nostril breathing, which enhances the Surya channel. You bring in the inhalation through the right channel. There's Chandra Bhedana, which is drawing in the inhalation through the left channel, the lunar channel, right, to enhance the lunar, the Pingala Nadi. Ujjayi Pranayam, the constriction of the throat, slight constriction of the throat, to be able to listen to the sound of the breath. Plavani, which is the holding of the breath, so the sense of floating, holding the breath in to enhance that udana vayu, the upward flowing prana, right? The sense of lightness and lift. And then Kapalbhati. Kapalbhati is actually a Shat Kriya, which is a cleansing, right? Or Shat Karma, which is a cleansing, one of the cleansing practices. But I put it in there because a lot of the times the Kapalbhati is a preparation for our pranayama, to get the lungs and the respiratory tract ready, right? And the prana flowing in the direction of the respiration, so that we can have the sense of where we are practicing and why we are practicing, right? So if you want to understand the benefits of these, what's written in the text, you can look to the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It's very clear there how to work step by step. But to practice, definitely you need to learn from somebody who is well versed in these. So going to a teacher, right? It's really important that you not just learn from books, that you also you study with somebody, a teacher or a practitioner who is well versed in these pranayamas, especially if you're looking for the more esoteric pranayamas, right? There's some pranayamas that we can easily incorporate into our our daily practice, and not just our daily practice, but also for our students as well. But before we do that, I want to move into just some general recommendations, like, right? So I said I have some ideas for you, or according to everything that we've studied, and general recommendations about how we approach our asana, how we approach our pranayama practice, to make it infused with this life force of prana, right? So the first is understanding where you are in the moment to know what to practice. What does that mean? When we started with the kosha model, right? These koshas move from very gross to subtle. If you find in the moment when you go to sit down to practice, your mind is subtle, that means you're calm, you feel grounded, you feel very relaxed and easy, good to start with pranayama into meditation. There's no need for asana because the rajas principle isn't there. It's not so heavily active. You can do more meditative asanas that already tie you into the peaceful flow of the mind, right? If you find that you're very agitated, of course, doing the asana to reduce the rajas, and then pranayama, and then meditation, right? So checking in with yourself as you practice your daily practice is about developing that wisdom to know, where am I in this moment? Which kosha do I reside in strongly in this moment? And it will guide you to what you need to practice for yourself, right? As a practitioner of yoga. Now, the breath rate that a lot of us are practicing and teaching now in asana is still very too fast, too fast, right? So establishing a ratio and teaching a ratio of 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale. Our yoga practice is meant to reduce the heart rate, right? Is to reduce the pulse rate and to allow for this calming of the nervous system, right? I'd call this the take 3 more breaths syndrome. When you're in asana class and the teacher puts you in a pose like, balasana, or says, okay, now take 3 more breaths in this position. And within 1 second, teacher has you get up into the next pose, right? So watch yourself to see if you have this habit, right? Take 3 more breaths means take 3 more breaths, which means take 30 more seconds, right? 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale. Learning to count within yourself as a teacher, as a practitioner, to be true to your breath, right? To be true to slow inhalation as you raise your arms, slow exhalation as you lower your arms. That's going to help to establish this prana vritti. A lot of you said, you're not sure of how to incorporate the pranayama. This is part of how we incorporate the pranayama. Understanding that we need to stay with this ratio of breathing that is long, smooth, subtle, and move away from the athleticism and the activity of yoga as a sport or as an exercise, right? Where the heart rate does increase, right? When you're running, the heart rate will increase, right? Of course, if you run a mile or 2 miles and then you lay down in shavasana, you're going to feel great. It's going to feel wonderful. And that's a lot of how we're treating the asana nowadays, right? Is to do things very quickly, very fast, right? Third, less is more when it comes to asana. So a lot of you have said, I have an hour class, I can't fit it all in, especially pranayama and meditation. It's because we're doing too much asana. It's not about, again, how many asanas we do, it's about the quality, right? You can access your internal organs, you can access the fascia, you can access the tissues on a very deep level if you teach and practice, right? First, you have to practice it, the attention to your breath, right? The real deep focus to your breath when you are moving through the practices, when you're moving through the asanas, right? And this asana, this idea of, pushing so many asanas, right? 30, 40, 50 asanas very quickly within an hour class because you want to have the whole body workout. The whole body workout, it can come from one asana. It can come from the complete engagement. That means your full concentrated mind in that moment to what you are doing. When the mind is dissipated and then you are introducing many fast moving asanas, it only increases rajas. It increases this outward flowing, active flowing aspect of the mind. So be more attentive to this quality of how you teach and how you practice, right? Which is furthered by the peak pose syndrome, right? The idea that there is, a very difficult pose that we have to get to in our asana practice, that we have to teach, that we have to attain, right? And that all of the asanas are then arranged around this peak, this pinnacle of, whatever pose it is that you're trying to get to, whether it's Hanumanasana or this, but that every pose is a peak pose. Every single thing, every moment is a peak moment, right? And of course, the ultimate peak is the stability of mind, stability of your asana to be able to sit in meditation. So maybe you have heard or have the habit of saying that asana is a preparation for meditation, but then we never get to meditation, right? Right? To withdraw yourself from even saying this anymore. That if asana truly is a preparation for meditation, then in your 1 hour class, to be very precise about how to prepare for the peak pose of sitting still, right? Cross-legged in a chair to observe the mind. Have I reduced the rajas enough? Have I reduced the activity enough through the focus, to bringing my students' focus to prana again and again, to slowing down the breath, to not moving so fast, right? Vinyasa is not fast movement. It is the very special application of prana in whichever pose that we are doing, right? And to practice in a way in which we are, having a little bit more integrity, right? And then the fifth is what I call asana bias, right? We all have this certain asanas, certain things that we either personally are drawn to or as a culture we are drawn to. And, right now it's like, if I see one more handstand workshop, I might lose my mind, right? So it's like constant obsession with one type of asana, one type of thing that you yourself are drawn to, that the whole society, everyone starts to kind of feed into it, right? It's like lemmings. We all start to feed into it. And then it becomes this great monster that we can't get ourselves out of. And it becomes also what our students demand of us, right? So many of my trainees or fellow, friends who are teachers tell me, well, I have to do it this way because this is what my students want. You are the practitioner, you are the one who has the experience, hopefully, right? And the daily practice to then be a guide for your students to develop their understanding. Remember, in the beginning, everything is bitter, right? And later, bitter becomes sweet, right? What you were averse to becomes an understanding that all aspects of the practice are important for how it is that you teach and what it is that you teach. Understanding your bias in what you're teaching is very important part of this, right? There are some poses that I can recognize that I haven't taught in a year. Oh my God, why is that? What is the aversion to that, right? To practice in a holistic way within my body to understand my own biases. And then Shavasana, right? I think it's very important in Shavasana not to leave students, right? Not to just let them go. And most people, it's a time for them to just space out, right? Shavasana is a place of yoga nidra. It's the place where you can start to draw your students towards more active understanding of prana, the way prana is moving in the body, more active understanding of how to concentrate the mind, to withdraw the senses, right? The quality of pratyahara to, whether it's point by point relaxation, whether you're chanting during Shavasana, whether you're placing attention to different parts of the body, right? Most people, right, that monkey mind will start to come in and it will pull them out of the practice. Shavasana will then not be so restful. It will just be very agitating. So really taking it, the practice does not end when you lay them down and then you can just be quiet. It's important to have some sort of guidance in Shavasana. Right. The seventh is, this idea of drop-in classes and how we consume yoga in our culture, right? So drop-in classes is mimicking of the exercise culture, right, of modern society, of also that you are getting a service. So coming in for a service, getting the service, and then leaving, right? And how we as teachers have to kind of mediate many of the ways in which modern wellness industry is running to also inspire students that the drop-in classes are a way of furthering their own knowledge for their own personal practice, daily practice at home. So trying to always have and commit students, right, to developing that daily discipline. And the drop-in classes are a little boost of inspiration or a way of educating oneself, a way of gaining more knowledge. But the goal here is to develop daily discipline practice, which works against this consumptive, tradition of our wellness industry, consumption of yoga as a service, consumption of all of the things related around yoga to we have to kind of work against that, and it's a beast that kind of has taken over that we have to give more energy towards developing the foundation of the disciplined daily practice. And then the last is the acquisition of knowledge coupled with a lack of integration. What do I mean by that? I don't know about you, but especially since the pandemic, so much information, so much inspiration, so many teachers, so many workshops, so many, conferences. There's so much to learn, acquire. But just beware, even with this series, right? Acquiring knowledge, acquiring inspiration, but then what? Right? And I have a little story for you, of course. And we didn't get to Bharadwaja's story last time, but it's the story of, Bharadwajasan, but the sage Bharadwaja. So the story goes that, he was a very devout sage. And one lifetime, all he did was isolate himself and study the Vedas, study the Vedas, study the Vedas. Next lifetime, same thing, studying, acquiring knowledge. Third lifetime, again, studying. He was a great devotee of Shiva. And finally, at the end of this third lifetime, Shiva appears to him. And Bharadwaja is so excited. He says, wow, I get to be with Shiva now. And Shiva says, what have you done for these 3 lifetimes? Your first lifetime is like this, he picks up these grains of sand, this much knowledge you've acquired. Second lifetime, this other handful of dirt. Third lifetime, this other handful of dirt. You see this Everest over there, this Himalaya, that's how much knowledge there is in the world. And how much can you acquire, right? The wisdom of the Vedas is contained not within the knowing, but in the living and the sharing of the wisdom. So learning to live the inspiration that you've received, learning to live the knowledge that you've experienced to study, that means through integration, through your daily practice, and then going and learning more, right? And then sharing, right? As we live, we learn, we integrate, and we share. So notice if your way right now, through the, this advent of the Zoom culture, it's been all acquisition and not so much integration. Very important to integrate. So how to do this, right? It's very simple, actually. First step is diaphragmatic breathing. Practicing yourself, teaching to your students in 3 key poses. That's laying on your stomach, Makarasana, laying on the back, Shavasana, or seated upright. Learning to use and understand how the diaphragm is related to the capacity for, the full expansion and contraction of your lungs, right? Another helpful aspect through your practice and through your teaching is to encourage a subtle ujjayi focus, right? So when you constrict your throat just very subtly, that sound of the breath gives you an indication whether there are any discrepancies in your inhale and your exhale, if you're holding your breath, right? All of these will become known to you when you're practicing the subtle ujjayi throughout the asana, so that the pranayama begins to become part of the asana. And that when you're trying to do a long held pose or you're moving very fast, and then your breath rate is also moving fast, that's an indication. The sound is showing you that you are rapidly breathing. That's an indication that you need to slow down, right? Incorporating Kapalbhati, right? Kapalbhati is the forceful exhalation, passive inhalation to help to cleanse and purify the respiratory tract, right? This is something that we can start to teach students 10 rounds, 15 rounds, right? I like to do it right in the beginning. The first thing I do is the breath awareness, and then I do Kapalbhati. And then we start our asana practice, right? And our asana practice is there for focus on strengthening the auxiliary muscles of breathing, stretching, right? And moving the entire respiratory tract, all the intercostals, the backs of the lungs, the fronts of the lungs, strengthening this whole area, right? So, what can a 1 hour class? 1 hour is not a lot of time, but it can be a very focused intention of breath awareness, whether that's with your ujjayi, kapalbhati, 20 to 30 minutes of your vinyasas that are focusing with this slow inhalation, slow exhalation, not so many asanas. You don't have to throw everything in there, which tends to happen. And then working towards these mudras or bandhas, right? If you remember the longer held asanas, right? Maybe Paschimottanasana, forward fold, inversions, longer held, staying longer in the asanas with the bandhas, with the focus on the mudras, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, Jalandhara Bandha. This can be towards an intermediate class. 5 to 10 minute Shavasana, 5 minute pranayama, and then 5 minute meditation. So it is possible. It's I teach 1 hour classes. It's definitely possible. It's just again about arranging your focus around what it is that you are intending for the class. If your intention is prana vritti, you will find that this is possible for you by again adopting the policy that less is more, right? Removing anything extraneous that to work out the whole body, to access all aspects of the body, doesn't mean we have to access all types of asana. It means that we have to do everything with extreme concentration on prana vritti, whichever practice that we're doing, whatever we're lifting our leg, we're lowering our leg, right? We're doing a back bend, we're doing a forward bend with full involved concentration. Okay, so before we do any practice, let's see how much time we'll have. But I would like to see what you have to say. I'm sure you have lots of questions on this.
Lots of
Yeah,
questions.
lots of questions. I
So
need.
really, yeah, really quickly, it seems that we're like seeing a couple different spellings for pranayama.
Mhm.
Neil would like to know what the difference between pranayama and pranayama would be. Are
Prani
those?
ayama is nothing. There's prana and
Mhm.
ayama. So when you combine the two, the a becomes long. Pranayama, right? So it's a combination of two words, right?
Okay, so one
Ayama,
word, pranayama.
yeah,
Thank
one
you.
word, one word. Yes. Prani is not prani ayama is not the word. Yeah.
Okay. So we also have a question from Gloria. As an elder of 56 years young, teaching younger people and yet moving to more reflective, restorative yoga for herself. Could you address how to balance, like many of students are young athletes? Also, what if she's teaching a mixed class with young and old? She said next week she'll be teaching a class for faculty and students at her local college.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this comes back to why do we have to teach athleticism so strongly to just the young. It's like a focus on the athletic aspect that's overrun, right? So instead of bringing in qualities of the more contemplative, what is your nature, right? Because when you give your nature what is natural to your own practice, you will be practicing with integrity, and that is what comes through to your students. So really teaching what you practice, that is the main thing. If you do not practice it, probably best not to teach it, right?
Mhm.
It's a very simple rule, right? The more, whatever Krishnamacharya used to say, as a teacher, we have to practice at least 5 times more than our students because we have to gain that mastery. Now, most of us don't do that. We don't have the capacity or the lifestyle or maybe even the intention to do that. But I would say, you know, understand and have faith in yourself. It's about trust in yourself, is what I'm hearing. That maybe I don't trust myself enough to teach what I love and that people will respond to it. So have faith in your practice, trust your practice, because what you practice will come through to whether they're 15, 20, 45, 75, 85, doesn't matter, right? There's a place for you and what you practice, and have trust in that.
Awesome. That's a great question as well. And I think she had some follow-ups too, just asking for a little bit more detail about how you lead meditation. Do you typically um, like read during the meditation or speak during the meditation, or do you just have the students kind of sit in silence for a moment, listen to their breath? What are some recommendations that you can give for led meditation?
Yeah, in the beginning when we are doing the breath awareness, definitely focusing on the breath with guidance, right? At the end, when we're coming at the end of the practice, you kind of guided them through Shavasana, you've given the guidance all the way. And then what I have them do is have a point of focus, and my favorite point of focus is center of the heart. So the center of the heart, focusing on the prana vritti, the pranasthana, focusing and concentrating the mind there, right? And then if you have some inspiring words, of course, please do share them. It helps students come in contact with their own sense of devotion to their practice. So I don't try to lead too much guided meditation, and I trust that the guidance that I've given over the last 55 minutes or 75 minutes, right, has enough power in it, right, to draw the mind there in that moment. And then you give a few indications, bring the mind to the place. Where am I focusing? Right? Give an essence, a few words about that place, why it's important. And then, let students explore. You don't have to talk too much. Let them have 1 to 2 minutes to explore this area for themselves, how it's feeling, and then you guide them out of it after, at the last moment, the last minute.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So Avi said that he's been enjoying all of your highlights from the Upanishads. For someone who is just starting out reading the Upanishads, would you recommend a certain one and or a specific translation, perhaps a translation that highlights more than one Upanishad?
Yeah, Eknath Ishwaran, he's the principal or the all of the Upanishads. You can get it on Amazon or wherever. Next week, it's our last session. I'm going to give you a full reading list, full list of all my recommendations for you. But Eknath Ishwaran, and it'll be on next week's slides.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, Avi also wanted to know, can you talk a little bit more about what it means for the practitioner to be destroyed when they prematurely practice breath retention?
No, I mean, I think it's basically when you are retaining your breath, when you are not in effortlessness, when you're not in a state of relaxation, it causes a lot of strain for the heart and the lungs. So to hold the breath, it's not like holding the breath when you're about to jump into a pool. That's a very different type of holding breath that it feels like a restraint or anxious feeling in the chest and the lungs, right? So when you retain the breath, the retention of the breath is almost a natural expression of the development of your pranayama. When you breathe in, it's almost a natural hold that has been placed there because you have learned how to build the previous parameters of lengthening inhale, lengthening exhale, right? There's a capacity that's developed. And that's something that each of us need to feel for ourselves and work with a teacher specifically on that, please.
Let's see. Nicole would like to know, what is the difference between Sitkari and Shitali Pranayama?
Yeah, Shitali is when you are taking in the air through inhalation. We'll do that today, hopefully, through the tongue. Chitkari is for some of us can't roll the tongue, right? I think there's a genetic thing where maybe some percentage of people can't roll the tongue. It's like that genetic thing where to some people cilantro tastes like soap. It's a funny little thing, right? So Chitkari is then doing the same, but now taking the air through the spaces of the teeth on the inhalation. So Shitali, Chitkari.
Great. Let me see. So with pranayama, and I noticed in the chat when you had asked the first question, just to see where everybody was in terms of teaching it and practicing it. There's always the question of contraindications that come up when it comes to pranayama. So Marcella would like to know, for example, with asthma, what breathing practices would you recommend for those who have respiratory issues like that?
Yeah, Ujjayi Pranayama.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a really popular question. Oh, can you repeat the 3 recommended poses to use for diaphragmatic?
Breathing? Yeah.
Yes.
So starting on your abdomen, Makarasana. When I first started learning diaphragmatic breathing, which means, bring the breath, expanding the chest completely, the chest cavity, the lung cavity completely, so that the diaphragm contracts and the belly expands, right? When I first started, we would put like 5-pound, 10-pound sandbags on our abdomen, right? And then, what that does is it helps to strengthen the diaphragm when you're laying in shavasana. Conversely, if you're laying on your belly on the ground, the pressure of the ground helps to strengthen the diaphragm. So the Makarasana, crocodile pose, where you're laying on your abdomen, is an excellent pose. If you're on your back, it has a different approach. And diaphragmatic breathing on the belly, the focus is on the lower back muscles, right? The rise and fall of the lower back, the kidney band area. If you're on your back, the focus is on the abdomen expanding and contracting. If you're seated upright, right, Sukhasana, Siddhasana, whichever upright meditation in a chair, the focus is on the expansion and contraction of the abdomen and the intercostals. So each position, teaching in each of the 3, when you're teaching beginners, each of the 3, you can have them focus on these different points, right? Because, we are 360-degree beings. So, we're not just forward moving, we're to the sides and we're to the back as well. So that those 3 poses can help to get a sense of this circular aspect of the breathing pattern. Good.
Oh.
Okay, we should do a little practice before or is there another question that you would feel like we have to answer right away?
I mean, there's a lot of questions, but I think Kapalabhati is very also practiced a lot in Kundalini. Is that the same as Breath of Fire, or is that
No,
those are different, right?
Bhastrika is the
Bhastrika, yes. Mm-hmm.
breath. Kapalbhati is the Shat Karma. It's the forceful exhalation, passive inhalation. Right, very relaxed. The inhale, you're in Bhastrika, you are forcefully pumping in 2 directions. And
Like
Kapalbhati,
they call it bellows, the bellows breathing.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it's
Yeah.
like a train engine, like
Mm-hmm.
it's like constantly going. Kapalbhati, you don't have to try to inhale. It just comes as a natural response of the drawing in of the navel as you exhale.
Yeah. I knew pranayama was going to be a very lots of questions for that.
Focus on the diaphragmatic breathing, focus on Ujjayi, focus on Nadi Shodhanam, alternate nostril breathing. Those 3 are safe, right? They're generally safe. There's not a huge amount of contraindications, but focus also on slow movement of breath during the asana, right? This is actually what I really want you to take away from this, right? To practice pranayama, you practice pranayama while you practice the asana. slow movements so that you're integrating the approach, not just on a muscular level or myofascial level, but deep into the internal organs as well. That's what's going to help you. That's what's going to help your students, right? And it's not about moving away from challenge, but you can do very challenging poses, but in a very refined, with a refined attitude, right? Good. All right, so let's we can't do everything that I wanted to do today, but how about we practice some shitali pranayama, right? It's a nice cooling pranayama. It's also very good for regulating and equalizing the temperature in the body, very good for purifying the nadis. And any of you who struggle with, lack of concentration or, low memory, right? It's also very nice for that as well. So shitali is done, right? Just go ahead and practice, roll your tongue and just draw in the breath through the tongue. Already you'll feel that very cool influx, right, through the lungs. And if you can't roll your tongue, you practice the shitkari. Just open the lips and just take in the air, clench the teeth lightly. Take in the air that way, right? So the first thing we do, we're going to, in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and the way we practice shitali is shitali on the inhalation, and then practicing the Nadi Shodhanam practice on the exhalation. So after shitali, we close one nostril and exhale out, either the right nostril or the left nostril. Remember, the pranayama parameters, there's 9 parameters to enhance the practice. Then we even add in the breath holds. Shitali, holding the breath in, exhaling out one nostril, holding the breath out, right? So all of those things. And then finally, at the end of the breath held out, then adding another parameter, which is the bandhas, practicing the bandhas on the breath held out. We won't be doing all of that. I want to stay with a more simplified shitali, which is as you breathe in, you'll take a 5-second inhalation with shitali or shitkari, and then you'll raise the head upright. Hold the breath in, take the tongue into the mouth, chin down towards the notch of the throat, and then close the right nostril, exhale, close the left nostril, exhale right for 10 seconds. We'll do this together. I'm just demonstrating. At the end of your exhalation, if you were well versed with Bahya Kumbhaka and the bandhas, you would practice the bandhas with the breath held out. If not, then again, shitali. Remember, drawing in as though you're drinking from a lotus stem, right? Drawing in that cool, refreshing air, holding the breath in enough so that you can drop the chin down and then blocking the opposite nostril. So let's try a few rounds. We have a few minutes. Let's see how much we can do. So start with the slight lift of the back of the neck, right? Jalandhara Bandha. Draw the shoulder blades together at the back. Establish Samavritti, even inhalation, even exhalation. Right, first step is that diaphragmatic breathing, feeling the expansion, contraction of the abdomen to your capacity, and then seeing if you can come into Samavritti. Maybe it's a 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale. If not, 4 seconds for each. If not, 3 seconds for each. Gradually over time, your capacity will increase. Good. Okay, and then exhale all the breath out both nostrils. Roll the tongue or clench the teeth. Shitali, 5 seconds, raise the face. Close the mouth, hold the breath in, drop the chin down. Take the hand up to the face, close the left nostril, exhale right, 10 seconds. Now your focus, the pranavritti, is at the nostril. Slow, quiet stream. Take the hand down. Inhale, Shitali. Take the face up. Close the mouth. Hold the breath in. Drop the chin down. Feel the lift of the chest towards the chin. Close the right nostril. Exhale, left 10 seconds. Chin is down. Your whole mind in the left nostril. Good. Take the hand down. Shitali, 5 seconds. Close the mouth. Chin comes down. Chest rises to meet the chin. Close the left nostril. Exhale, right, 10 seconds. Inhale, Shitali. Close the mouth. Hold the breath in as the chin comes down towards the notch of the throat. Close the right. Exhale, left, 10 seconds. Relax the hand down. Breathe in through both nostrils. Right, feeling both nostrils moving through the central channel. Right and left nostrils meeting in the middle, deep in the center of the head. And just stay with your breath either at the nostrils or deep in the midbrain. Face is relaxed. Good. Just observing the quality of this pranayama to perhaps unveil, to lighten, to bring that dawn of light, to illuminate the mind. When you're ready, slowly opening your eyes. Good, very nice. So that's Shitali. Maybe some of you have never practiced that before, but that's a variation of Shitali given by the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, also by how we learn in the Vinyasa Krama tradition as well. So if you're interested, I'll try to go through your questions and answer some of your questions in the beginning of next session, our last session together, studying the mind and karma and dharma and all of what is encompassed in the meaning of these two words. All right, so I wish you all well. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all of your questions, but we'll try next time.
Thank you so much, Kushi. Just a reminder, this particular session falls under the techniques, training, and practice educational category for those of you who are reporting these sessions individually. If you have any other questions about this or any of the other sessions, feel free to send us an email, info@yogaalliance.org. We're happy to answer your questions there. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next week. Namaste.
Namaste. Bye bye, everyone.